looks like maybe some over there too, maybe.
I have a few announcements, and then we'll get on with the debate. So everybody knows, we have a special rate for parking, $5 if you park in the garage here in the hotel. You just have to go down to the check-in counter, one floor down in the lobby, and tell them you're with the Tea Party. And they're ready. And then they'll give you a ticket for $5 that you can get out there. A couple announcements. I've been asked to. In fact, I asked to make this announcement. America's Prosperity Foundation will be hosting a series of precinct organizing trainings through the Grassroots Leadership Academy. They will last from 9:30 to 1 p.m. on Saturdays, March 24th, April 7th, and April 14th. It will cover how to be a more effective grassroots manager and organizer, as well as creating a strategic plan. To sign up and find out about the locations on the events, reach out to Jacob Fish at the table outside. It's just outside the door on the left. And I really do encourage everybody in here to sign up. This is what we do best, is grassroots organizing. And I am, when I was talking to Jacob at the advance this year, and he told me about it, I was really excited about that. This is something that the party and the Tea Party and the Republican Party has needed for a long time. It's professional help in getting out the vote. That's what we should be about. So I highly encourage everybody to get the information from America's Prosperity in the hallway. Next announcement is there's another Republican debate, a candidate forum that is, for U.S. Senate in Goochland. So if you want to go online to the Goochland Tea Party, is it the Tea Party event? Yes. www.goochlandteaparty.org, and you get the information on that. So some explanations are in order. Several months ago, we started organizing for this event. This is our annual spring event, and we decided at that time that we would have a debate for all the candidates that declared for state senate, U.S. Senate, that is. And so we sent invitations out once we got organized to the 4 candidates at the time that had declared: Corey Stewart, Nick Freitas, E.W. Jackson, and Tim Kaine. As far as Tim Kaine is concerned, we still have our hand cupped behind our ear, awaiting a reply. Since then, 3 more candidates have applied or have announced the candidacy for the Senate seat. Now, since the debate this debate is before the deadline for turning in signatures, there are only 2 candidates right now that have turned in their signatures. The rest of the candidates are not actually qualified candidates yet. And one of the things we discussed in putting this event together is we're taking a chance in inviting all these people because they declared, but it's who we are. We want everybody to participate that we can. And we do these events so we, the Tea Party, the grassroots, can ask the questions. Our moderators are loaded up with questions from us that they have crafted into questions that they're going to ask the moderators. And some we have that are generic, and some of them are, we'll tell you who actually submitted the question. So our first encounter problem was E.W. Jackson. He had another event this morning, and it was going to be real tight. And I'm going to read you a letter from E.W. E.W. is not able to make it today, but I'm going to read you the letter that he sent to us. Then yesterday, we received a note from Ivan Raker, which I want to read to you. Number one, since the campaign just participated in a candidate forum at Patrick Henry Tea Party meeting early this week. Number two, because my home committee convention is tomorrow morning, where I need to be present to vote for our next committee's leadership. And three, because the campaign is focused on building a strong conservative base in Northern Virginia in order for our party to have a chance at victory in November. Whoever the eventual nominee is, I unfortunately will not be able to attend the debate today. That came in at 3 o'clock yesterday. And then last night at 10 o'clock, we received another note. And this is from Dr. Minerva Dias. Pray all is well. I regret to inform you that I will be unable to attend the debate tomorrow. I'm still on the road getting signatures. Thanks for everything you do for the Republic. So it turns out, well, first let me read E.W.'s letter. Dear Tea Party friends, my commitment to the Tea Party and its principles have never wavered. From the first time I stood on the podium on April 15th, 2009, to speak to and for the Tea Party and our principles, to this very day, I have believed that the Tea Party is a godsend to help restore America and constitutional governance and fiscal sanity. I am a proud member of the Tea Party and have answered the call every time I've been needed. Unfortunately, the forum to be held on March 17th was in conflict with a prior commitment I made to a men's conference held at Atlantic Shores Baptist Church in Virginia Beach. The original staff commitment for me to attend the Tea Party event took place during a transition in my campaign and did not take into account that it would be impossible for me to speak in Virginia Beach around 10 a.m. and get to the meeting in Richmond by 11:30. Had it been thought through, we would have asked to make the Tea Party event at least an hour later. I take responsibility for that, and I apologize to my Tea Party friends. Regretfully, as much as I would like to be in attendance, I cannot break my word to those to whom I first gave it. I trust that after it is determined which candidates have secured the place on the ballot, there will be further opportunities for the candidates to address the issues and answer the questions of Tea Party members. I did that extensively just this week for nearly 2 hours at the Beaver Dam Tea Party meeting. I look forward to doing it as often as the opportunity presents itself. Again, my humblest apologies for my absence. Please forgive the scheduling conflict. I remain yours in service to our Commonwealth and our country. E.W. Jackson. So what we have today is a debate between the only two candidates that are qualified to be on the ticket, June 12th. There may be more, but we were lucky to have the two candidates, and so there can be a decision made today, hopefully by many people, as to who their candidate will be. So, with that, I'd like to introduce the moderators. We were very fortunate. If I get to them. Professor Henry or Hank Chambers is a professor of law at the University of Richmond, focused on the areas of constitutional law, criminal law, law and religion, and employment discrimination. Hank? Come on. Our second moderator is Jim Herring. He's the on-air personality for Summit Media, and many of you may know him as the MC of the Liberty Farm Festival. Jim, we're lucky to have you. It turns out that it's going to be one-on-one today. Two moderators, two candidates. I believe, Nick, you won the your number one vote. No, you forwarded it. Yeah. So we do straws and that. The first candidate, I'll ask you guys to sit until I get off your stands here, and then you both come up together. But Nick Freitas is an Army Special Forces veteran and currently representing Virginia's 30th House District. And Corey Stewart, former gubernatorial candidate and currently chairman of the Prince William County Board of Supervisors. We thank you, gentlemen, for coming today.
Rick, did you do the debate this year?
I didn't read the debate rules, and I've been reminded by the moderators that I did not go over the rules. We did a draw just a few minutes ago. Nick Freitas drew the number 1 straw, so he gets the first question. And then, let's see how we go. Corey won the second straw, number 1 straw, for his closing remarks. So he'll give his closing remarks first. As I just said, the questions were solicited by individuals from the Tea Party. Each candidate will have up to 90 seconds to give an answer. There are some lights in the back for them to know what their timing is. Each candidate has been given 2 red cards and 2 green cards. The red cards. Sorry. I'll get it for you. All right.
I don't know.
Actually, I think they're over there.
There they are.
Wow.
You can't miss them.
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
The red cards are used, and you only have 2. The red cards are used to ask a question of your opponent directly. So you show your red card, you get to ask the question. The candidates will have 90 seconds. 90 seconds to respond. There will be no rebuttals to those questions. There's a green card, and each candidate got 2 of those. And you show your green card if there's a question asked and your turn is passed up and you don't have a chance to rebut. So the candidate that's answered the question is the second one, and we're going up to a new question. You can hold up your green card to rebut that. And that rebuttal is 30 seconds for the green card. We encourage answers to the questions to be about what each candidate stands for, believes, and we strongly discourage answers that attempt to betray what another candidate stands for or believes. I think that's it, guys. Have fun.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank Chairman Stewart and Delegate Freitas for being here as well. And since Delegate Freitas won the draw on the opening question, you will respond first. We will ask one question. Each candidate will have a chance to respond to that question. Delegate Freitas, your first question is, according to the Joint Center for Taxation and Congressional Budget Office, the recent tax cuts could trigger a $1.1 trillion addition to the national debt. Is this important to you? Do you support the tax cuts? And how would you balance tax cuts against possible increases to the national debt?
So first of all, again, thank you all for having us. I absolutely support the tax cuts that we just experienced. In fact, I think we need more tax cuts. One of the things that always frustrates me is when politicians ask the question, how do we pay for tax cuts? You don't have to pay for tax cuts. You have to pay for government spending. So what we need to do, to do with tax reform is not just continue the reform, but also to continue to cut. Because what we've seen with this tax reform is that we used to make it more expensive to do business overseas than it is to do business here at home. And that's changed this. And quite frankly, this administration of Donald Trump deserves a great deal of credit for being able to force this through in order to get it put into place. Now, the next thing that we have to do is start to look at the overall tax structure and how we arrange that. Because I think we need to move to either a fair tax or a flat tax, because it's a far more equitable way in order to achieve taxation. And it keeps money in the hands of the people that earned it, as opposed to government who constantly wastes it. Now, with respect to how do we ensure that we don't increase deficits with respect to tax cuts, it's pretty simple. Cut government spending. There's a whole variety of things the government is currently spending money on right now that, quite frankly, are not legitimate functions of government. Maybe they're good ideas, maybe they're not, but it's not the core role of government. And another way that we can actually ensure that this doesn't go into deficit spending, here's an idea. Stop sending money to countries that hate us.
Chairman Stewart, would you like the question repeated, or are you good?
Sure, this is fine. Well, first of all, as you all know, I strongly support the president, and I strongly supported, and I always will, any tax cut that he proposes. Absolutely. I think it's highly disingenuous of the Democrats and the other socialists in this country to criticize the President of the United States for pushing through this big tax cut. And yes, in the short term, it may cause some limited growth in the deficit. But it's also, we need to remind ourselves what President Obama did. $8 trillion in stimulus funds. And what did we get for that? Nothing but more deficit. That's it. That's it. What we have to do is exactly that. We've got to make these cuts, these tax cuts, permanent. The individual rates are set to expire. The only way we're going to make those individual tax cuts permanent is to reduce government spending, starting with the elimination of the Department of Education. I know something about cutting spending because I've been leading the second largest locality in the state. It's tough to make cuts. But you know how you do it? You force the Democrats, you know what? That was a slip of the tongue, but I really meant it. You force the bureaucrats to find their own cuts. You cap their budgets and force them to dig deep into the bureaucracy and make deep cuts.
Thank you all so much. Appreciate that. This is a follow-up, so we'll go in the same order for this question. Is the national debt right now at the proper level, or do we need a structural surplus to pay down the national debt?
No, the national debt is never. You know what the proper level for the national debt is? Zero. That's the proper level for the national debt. I don't know how many times our families had to exemplify that one of the ways that you destroy a country is through debt. And quite frankly, President Obama took this country's debt from an already exorbitant amount all the way up to $20 trillion and climbing. So no, what we need to do when we look at the way the government spends money is, once again, it's not that difficult. Break down the budget. What is a legitimate function of government? Law enforcement is a legitimate function. The military is a legitimate function. Infrastructure is a legitimate function. But we've got a number of other things, whether it's the Department of Energy, whether it's the Department of Education, whether it's housing and urban development, where quite frankly these programs have spent millions, if not billions of dollars, and they have not achieved what they promised they would give us. So we need to definitely pay down the national debt, and one of the best ways that you do that is, again, cut government spending, and then cut government spending on some of these foreign wars that we're involved in right now that, quite frankly, we should not do. It is not that difficult equation. Here in Virginia, we have a balanced budget. Now, we still have debt in Virginia, but we have a balanced budget, and what it does is it prevents politicians from constantly spending money on things that we shouldn't be spending money on. If we would just keep more money in the hands of the people that actually earned it, that would give us the kind of economic development to be able to climb out of this debt and see widespread economic opportunity for all Americans.
There's only one way to cut the deficit in the future. There is only one way, and that is we must tackle entitlement spending. There's only one way, and that is, number one, and most importantly, we need an absolute and full repeal of Obamacare. The thrust of Obamacare was to essentially double the number of people who are Medicaid. Double the number of people on Medicaid. The federal government will incur 9% of that cost. And every state that has adopted it, every single state that has adopted it, the costs are much higher, on average 35% higher than they anticipated. In fact, there are 4 states in the United States that are struggling to keep Medicaid, Obamacare from becoming the only program that those states offer. Arkansas, Kentucky, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. And soon, unfortunately, because of weak-kneed Republicans in the House of Delegates, that might be the case in Virginia, too. Yep. We need to call them out. No program created and administered by the federal government is efficient. None of them. Not a single one. Medicaid was created in 1965. It's failing. It's running out of control. It's burdening taxpayers. It's burdening states. And it's going to bankrupt this country. We need to stand tough. We need a complete repeal of Obamacare and an end to the Medicaid expansion.
Thanks so much. This next question in some ways jumps off of the last one. This one is to Chairman Stewart first. Entitlement reform is tied definitely to deficit reduction. How do you define entitlements? What additional entitlement reforms would you like to see to stem their effects on the national deficit? Think, for example, Social Security or other programs.
Well, that's kind of a perfect lead-off. It's not easy, right? There needs to be some sort of safety net for those who are doing without. Now, currently Medicaid covers pregnant women, poor children, the infirmed, the elderly. Now, when you double the number of recipients, not only are you increasing the cost, but you're making it so much more difficult for those who are currently on Medicaid to find the medical care that they need. That's because only a certain percentage, a limited percentage, of medical providers actually even accept Medicaid. If we don't reform it, and by the way, there is no possible way that the government in Washington that created the problem is going to solve the problem. And that is why we need to leave this and other programs to the states. I am in full support of block granting Medicaid to the states. Having every state develop its own program in conjunction with the localities is going to be more efficient. It's going to be better for the taxpayers. It's going to be better for the states. And it's going to be better for those who depend upon Medicaid services.
So as you look at entitlement programs, whether it's Social Security, whether it's Medicaid, whether it's Medicare, I want to focus on Social Security for a second. Who here thinks the government is either uniquely qualified or constitutionally authorized to manage your retirement? Yeah, me neither. And Social Security is a perfect example of how they failed to do so. So the solution going forward is essentially 2 things. One, we have to honor the commitment to the dependency that's already been created on that program. If it's something you've been paying in all of your life and you're now dependent on, we need to honor that commitment. But we also need to give younger people the option to choose something else going forward so they're not tied to the same failing program at this point. Let's talk about Medicaid and Medicare. Medicaid specifically, the reason why I have fought so hard about this in the House of Delegates, Medicaid started with 4 million people on it and now has 73 million people on it. And the reason for that is because government loves to create dependency in its people. I don't want people living day to day in this country thinking that the best they can expect out of their life is whatever scraps some politicians is going to offer them. Right? If you want to move, if you're serious about this reform, it is not good enough to just move it from one government entity at the federal level to another government entity at the state level. We need to start getting serious about, once again, providing people their own options to be able to plan for their retirement. Right now, we have the patient on this side, the doctor on this side, and a huge government bureaucracy in the middle. No wonder prices go up and quality goes down. So the solution for all of this is, once again, put decisions back in the hands of people, not politicians and bureaucrats.
This next question will go to Delegate Freitas first. We want to thank Deb Griffin of the Richmond, Virginia Tea Party for this question. Candidates, what set of beliefs or isms do you see as the greatest threat to the United States today and in the near future? And what threat does it pose? And how do you feel it would affect the United States?
So I would say socialism, cultural Marxism, really what this comes down to, and here's the problem. This whole debate that we're having in this country right now is between two competing philosophies. It's a philosophy of control versus a philosophy of liberty. Right? For over 27 years now, Tim Kaine has been a part of the philosophy of the control. And what he essentially says is, give me more of your money, give me more of your freedom, give me more of your decisions, and then Tim Kaine will live your life for you better than you could possibly live it for yourself. Right? That's what every new rule, every new tax, every new regulation is. It is the philosophy of not only control, but force and coercion. When we are constantly having decisions over to the government to solve things, we are picking the least creative, most violent way to solve problems. I want problems solved by free people working in voluntary cooperation with one another. Because that's when you get things like aircraft and cell phones and satellites. And when you are constantly handing all of those decisions back over to the government, you get the DMV and you get $20 trillion in debt. You get any So here's the most important part. Here's the most important part to remember, because we as Republicans and we as conservatives have been caricatured relentlessly by the left, saying that we don't care about people, that we're greedy, that we're selfish. No, here's the difference. We don't see people as a mindless cog in some sort of state-run program. We see people as beautifully and wonderfully created with a purpose to serve in this life. And government's job is to protect their liberty, their property, provide equal justice before the law so they can achieve their purpose.
For 50 years, the left has waged war on America. They hate America. They really do want to destroy it. They think that it's a bad influence on the world. For 50 years, they've done everything to destroy us and our culture and our heritage. And for too long, Republicans have backed down. All these accusations, they make the accusations. They've done this against me for 10, 12 years. Political correctness is a problem. Let me tell you why. America can do anything. We can recover from anything. Every single time that this country's been faced with a massive challenge, when people were in despair, we came through. But that ability to conquer, to win, to have a better future, is all based upon our Constitution and an adherence to the Constitution. The left knows that they can't repeal the First Amendment or the Second Amendment, so what they can't do legally, they do through ridicule, embarrassment, threats. You can lose your job because you're not saying the right thing. And when Americans don't feel free to say what they believe, we're not free. We must follow the president and destroy political correctness.
Chairman Stewart, a question from
Microphone, please.
I've taken a strong stand. Even before President Trump, people say you're trying to be like President Trump. I'm saying he's trying to be like me. I led the nation's toughest crackdown on illegal immigration more than 10 years ago. And I had Republicans tell me, don't do it, don't do it. You're never going to get reelected in Prince William County. It's a 55% majority district. It's 465,000 residents. It's in Northern Virginia. Don't do it. But I did. And today we've handed over 8,000 criminal illegal aliens over to ICE for deportation. But that is not enough. We have to do that all across the country. We must focus first, of course, on deporting those illegal aliens who are preying upon our children and upon our citizens. We have to deport them. Every single one of them. Can you hear me, by the way? Yeah. Okay, can we freeze my time here while we correct the microphone, please? Okay, is that better? All right. Can you just give me a couple more seconds here because there was some problems there.
Still can't hear you.
Can't hear me?
Not on the mic. It's the speaker. The speaker blue.
Speaker.
Corey!
Citizens citizen back in the United States Census.
Yes, yes, we need to do that.
Not only do I support that,
Yes.
and this is going to make some news, but I'm suggesting that we should share that information with Immigration and Customs Enforcement so that they can be That's what we got to do. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, we must support the president. I know not every Republican believes this or wants to support it because it's controversial. But the only way we're going to control the problems in this country is to stop this massive inflow
Yes.
of illegal aliens into this country who are suppressing wages, who are committing crimes.
Yes.
And that is why we must build the wall.
Hold on to that until we get you set up. We just need to reset the timer, please.
Sounds like it's working now.
It's the Democrats.
Okay, so here's the issue. This is another area where Republicans, where conservatives constantly get caricatured by the left. Because we want legal immigration, we're constantly referred to as being racist, we're bigots, we're xenophobes. It is so incredibly frustrating. I remember a time in my district, we had two people that came here legally, followed all of the rules, and because of a mix-up between Department of Labor and Department of Immigration, they had to go home. They had actually adopted someone out of the Virginia foster care system. Again, they were following all of the rules. But the problem was this. Democrats have become so focused on people that have come here illegally, they completely ignore not only U.S. citizens, but all the immigrants that came here legally as well. So this is a pretty simple solution. We have two things, and the president is absolutely correct about this. One is border security, which includes building a wall, and the other part is comprehensive immigration reform, a merit-based immigration system. I love to hear liberals talk about what horrible human beings we are because we want a merit-based immigration system. You know, like Canada and the UK and Australia. By the way, have you ever read Mexico's immigration laws? Oh my gosh, you want to talk about draconian. But again, the one thing that we have to get out there, and we need to make very, very clear, is that we love it when people come to this country because they want to be Americans. All right, but they have to understand that you are fleeing something in the first place. You're fleeing a country that didn't respect rule of law. You're fleeing a country that doesn't respect individual economic prosperity. So when you come to this country, you have to obey the rules, and as the federal government, we have an obligation to enforce them.
Follow-up to that one, how do you deal with, say, children who are undocumented, who were brought here early and know no other homeland?
Does this question go to me first?
Yeah, you first, Chairman.
Okay. All right. You can hear me now, right?
No, it's still not.
Let's stop the clock for.
All right.
Would you clear it back to the original time, please? Thank you.
Let me ask you this question, folks. If you break the law and you go to jail and you're separated from your family, who's responsible for breaking up your family?
You are.
Not government, not society.
That's right.
And by the way, there's nothing to stop an illegal alien who's being deported from taking their family with them. People talk about the dreamers. Well, what about your dreams? What about the millions of Americans who are working class, whose wages have been suppressed? You travel across this country, you get off on a couple exits here and there. We have ghost towns. We have people who are suffering. We need to think about our own citizens first. Now, my good friend over here, Nick, he was asked this question last December, just a couple months ago, whether he would commit to supporting the building of the wall, and he refused to do it. Now, here in front of this crowd, I wonder if he's changed his mind.
We're going to ask that you please refrain from that. Thank you. We're going to get it step out of the vote.
So, Corey has some problems with the truth from time to time. And this is one of them. This is one of them, because we absolutely do need to build a wall. I absolutely believe that we have not only the right to build a wall, we have a responsibility to enforce border security. And by the way, it's not just a wall. It's an entire technological unit which is going to go ahead and make sure that that wall can be properly enforced. And that wall is not only for our safety, it's also for the safety of people trying to cross the border. So once again, we need to talk about this in a way that everybody can understand and appreciate what it is we're trying to accomplish as a country. Now, with respect to the people that are already here, once again, I'll never forget, I was about 13 years old, and I was actually standing out, and my mother was arguing for Prop 187 in California, which essentially said that the welfare programs that we have in this country are for Americans, and it's not fair when illegal immigrants come over and take advantage of them. And I remember arguing with a group of people out in the parking lot, and their whole thing was, what about the children? What about the children? I think everyone in here is sympathetic to the children, but the question I asked back is, well, wait a second, what about our children? Don't we have a right, do we not have a right to be first and foremost concerned with our children? It doesn't mean that it doesn't make us bitter or mean people. It just means that every country prioritizes their own citizens first with respect to their liberties, with respect to their property. And the United States should be no different in that. So there's plenty of rooms and plenty of ways to show compassion, but we have to enforce our laws, and we have to ensure that we are first and foremost taking care of our children and our citizens.
Illegals and illegal activities. Herbert from the Goochland Republican Committee asked this question. The right to vote is one of the most valuable assets of citizenship in this country. Do you feel illegal voting is an issue in this country? And if so, what legislation would you propose to prevent it? And how do you feel about the sanctity of the voting booth? And what will you do to protect it? And that goes to you first, Delegate Freitas.
Okay. So we passed legislation in Virginia that I was proud to support, which required a photo ID. And once again, we were called evil, bigoted people that didn't want other people to be able to vote. So you know what we did? We provided a free photo ID to everyone so that they could show up to the polls and they could cast their vote. Because I can tell you right now, simply voting does not make a republic legitimate. Saddam Hussein was voted into office, right? 98% of the vote. It was really overwhelming, right? Because the option that you were given was you vote for me or your family dies. So this whole idea that the most important thing is just as many votes as possible. No, the most important thing is civic engagement by people that have the legal authority to vote. So we need to do a couple of things. One, we need to make sure that we're using the photo ID laws and that we're enforcing those. Not only that, but when we actually do have people engaging in voter fraud, we have to have Commonwealth's attorneys, we have to have lawyers that are willing to prosecute, because those people are directly undermining our political process as a result. And if they're not willing to do that, and if they're not willing to do that, and it's a federal election, then the federal government does have a place to step in and say, if you're not going to enforce election law, we'll help you enforce it. Right? But at the end of the day, what this does is you make it easy for people to vote who are legal voters, but then you crack down on everybody that is engaging in voter fraud. So do voter ID laws and purge the rolls of voters that are no longer supposed to be on those rolls.
Well, unfortunately, talk is cheap. Talk is cheap. Talk is cheap, and it's especially cheap here in Virginia. That law that was passed in the aftermath of 9/11 has not been enforced by the Commonwealth of Virginia. Here's what I want to do. There were voting irregularities in 2017 in Virginia. We know that throughout the state. We need to ask the Department of Justice to, instead of pursuing these frivolous, untrue claims against the Trump administration, to investigate voter fraud in the Commonwealth of Virginia. That request needs to come from the General Assembly. There has been no request so far. Here's another one. Did you know that in the Commonwealth of Virginia, you do not need to sign an application to get an absentee ballot? Do you know what that means? That means you're going to have 50 or more applications for an absentee ballot coming from a single address. And it's happening right now. And do you know what the House of Delegates has done about it? Absolutely nothing. Folks, here's what we got to do. This is what we got to do. We got to enforce the laws. We need to investigate these claims of voter fraud and prosecute anybody who votes fraudulently.
Question to that one. This one will go to Delegate Freitas as well. Should the federal government, you're running for federal office here, should the federal government step in towards states who openly disregard federal laws such as sanctuary cities?
So here in Virginia, I have repeatedly voted for legislation that would prevent sanctuary cities from taking place. And again, Corey's having a little bit of difficulty with the truth. We have passed legislation in Virginia to address this. Unfortunately, we have a Democrat governor that vetoes that legislation repeatedly because that's how our government system works. Maybe if we could have got a little more help in this general election instead of constantly running down our own party, we'd have a Republican governor. Here's what I will say about enforcing federal law. I'm a federalist, which means I actually believe in the Constitution, which means I don't want the federal government running around telling states what to do with every aspect of our laws and how we enforce things. Now, I will say this, though. There's a lot of money that is leaving the state and going to the federal government. And when a state refuses to enforce federal immigration law, and then the federal government refuses to allow that state to enforce its own immigration law, well, then there is mechanisms that we have in place in order to ensure that they don't get some of the spending or they don't get some of those tax dollars back for various programs. Because it makes no sense for the federal government to fund a bunch of welfare programs when a state allows a bunch of illegal aliens or people that are not qualified for those programs to then use that money. So there is a mechanism for punishment, but I will tell you this right now. If you believe in federalism, no, the federal government does not have a right to come in and tell a state agency what they have to do. Because if you allow them to do that, I want you to think about what happens when we have somebody in the White House that we don't trust. What happens to our gun laws? What happens to religious liberty? So we
I'll repeat the question. Let me see. Is this working? Okay. Should the federal government step in towards states who are openly disregarding federal laws, such as the sanctuary cities?
Yes. Absolutely. Folks, if I violate federal law, suppose I violate federal civil rights law, do you know what happens to me? I get prosecuted as a public official, and not only that, but they pierce the veil of the public office and they go after you personally. Not only for monetary damages, but for criminal prosecution. Why is it any different for our federal immigration laws? Why is it any different, folks? Don't you think it's time that we start enforcing those things? You know, if I trust every state, it'd be a different thing. How many of you trust California? How many of you trust New Jersey? New York? No. If the federal government does not step in and prosecute any local or state official, this is what I'm proposing. Prosecute any local or state official who declares himself a sanctuary city. By the way, I don't trust California either. To issue driver's licenses when they're doing that to illegal aliens. There needs to be a federal law to protect the vote. That is a civil right that you all enjoy. And just because a citizen is in California or some other liberal socialist state doesn't mean that those citizens do not deserve protection, deserve the protection of their vote, and that's why we need to make sure that there's a federal requirement that driver's licenses are only issued to legal residents of the United States, and it indicates on there whether or not you're capable of voting.
So one quick follow-up to start with Chairman Stewart. what should it take for someone to regain their right to vote after the individual commits a non-violent or violent felony, if they should ever regain their right to vote?
Well, this is kind of a personal question for me. Look, if somebody pays their debt to society, they need to have their rights restored to vote. But it should not be automatic, because there's some healing in that. When somebody comes out of incarceration, somebody's been convicted of a crime, and they pull their lives together, yes, their voting rights should be restored, but it shouldn't be blanket the way Terry McAuliffe did it.
Right.
That was wrong.
That was wrong. Yep.
So I'll leave it at that. It's kind of a touchy subject, but that's the way I feel.
Thanks, sir. Delegate Freitas.
So I'll say first and foremost, I am shocked by what Chairman Stewart just said. What he essentially said was that he wants the federal government to come in and prosecute states for not carrying out federal law.
Yes.
I want you to understand something. I want you to understand what that means. That means if we ever, God forbid, had a Hillary Clinton presidency and they passed federal gun bans, then they're going to, now when a sheriff ignores that law and refuses to enforce it, the federal government's going to go in and put that person in jail. That's the difference. That's the difference between seeing a headline. That's the difference between seeing a headline and actually understanding how the Constitution works and why those protections are in place. Secondly, with voter rights, when Terry McAuliffe did that, you know what the House of Delegates did? We sued him, and we won. So here's what I'll say. If you've committed a violent crime, I want it to be hard for you to get your voting rights back. If you've committed a crime where there's a victim, I still want it to be difficult for you to get your voting rights back, but there should be a process. And then finally, if you've committed a crime where there is no victim, once you've served your time, I think you should get your voting rights back automatically. Because we have too many laws on the books in this country that create criminals, not because there's a victim created, not because someone was stolen from or someone was harmed, but just because the government says so. And in cases like that, we do need automatic restoration. But if you've created a victim or you've engaged in violent behavior towards someone else, no, there needs to be a process for that to make sure that you've been reformed.
Chairman Stewart has chosen to use his rebuttal card. He will have 60 seconds to rebut. 30, is it 60 seconds? 30 seconds, I'm sorry, 30 seconds.
There is a rash of political, public officials, university officials, who are deliberately, and they're so blatant, declaring themselves as sanctuary colleges, sanctuary cities, sanctuary states. If we allow them to do this, we will have absolute anarchy. We already do have anarchy in our illegal immigration system. You're going to, here's the problem. In Fairfax County, folks, Fairfax County, they just declared themselves, you know what they're not going to do?
That's time, sir.
They're not going to have
Delegate Freitas has chosen to
He's
rebut
okay
that
with
as
that.
well. So Delegate Freitas, you will have 30 seconds as well.
You're right. When somebody declares to be a sanctuary city, there is a lot that we can do to oppose that and to fight back against that. And there's things that the federal government can do within the Constitution. If every time an individual state or individual locality does something stupid, we throw out the Constitution and give the federal government more power to do things that it's not authorized to do, that will come back to bite us, I guarantee it. So we do need to crack down on this, but there's a constitutional mechanism for doing so. And I'm not going to surrender on the Constitution for political expediency.
Joan Blackman asked this question, as a matter of fact, and we appreciate that. With the recent school shooting in Florida, many people are looking for answers to the issue. What, if any, legislation would you propose to stop future school shootings such as this?
So I spoke about this recently. And I was happy because that speech got over 30 million views, and we actually got to change some of the national narrative and debate that was going on as a result. Because all the left is interested in, they are myopically obsessed with guns. Yes. As if that's the only issue. You have been able to get a gun in this country since our inception. But we didn't have a bunch of school shootings. That's new. So we need to look at all the different issues that actually contribute to that sort of problem. Because if we just take away the object, right, not only are we infringing on someone's civil liberty to be able to defend themselves, not only are we not guaranteeing that schools are actually going to be safer, but we're not addressing the behavior. We're not addressing the discipline issues that we have within our schools. We're not addressing broken families and how that creates, most of our prison population come from broken homes. And we're not addressing any of those issues because the left wants to focus exclusively on guns. So here's what I'll tell you. There's a couple different ways we can debate this. The first one is a liberty issue. I'm sorry. I've already made this very clear. I am not surrendering on the Second Amendment because the left promises me security if I give over my guns. I've seen how that works. But there is a lot we can do, and there's a lot we have done in Virginia. We actually voted to allow for more school resource officers and for retired law enforcement to be able to be armed security at our schools. So I got a question for the left. There's a lot of things we agree on, whether it's trauma-informed education, whether it's additional school resource officers. Do you want to talk about the things we agree on, or do you want to completely fight on the other thing?
Thank you. Chairman Stewart.
Hey, Nick, that was a good speech. It was a good speech. Well, we don't fix problems with speeches, folks. We fix problems with action. Every single time there is a shooting, the left always talks about guns. And we use the right, we'd say, no, look, there are more guns back in the 1950s per capita than there are today. We didn't have these rash of school shootings. That's not the solution. Since 1950, every single mass shooting in the United States, except for 3, has been in a gun-free zone. Because you know what a gun-free zone sign means? It means come on in. No one's going to shoot back. It's an invitation to a murderer. We need to end gun-free zones in our schools and every other place. But here's why I got elected in a very, very difficult district of 465,000 people. Because I don't just talk the talk, I walk the walk, and I get things done. Yeah. A couple of years ago, after the shooting in Connecticut at Sandy Hook, we funded school resource officers in every single one of our middle schools and high schools in my county. And just now, and this year, I want to be the first to announce that we will become the first locality, and we need to do this across the nation. We will become the first locality in Virginia to place retired police officers in every single school in my county.
Starting with Delegate Freitas. The Second Amendment was originally ratified to allow the people to protect themselves and their states from tyranny. Should the Second Amendment apply to weapons that are of little use in protecting themselves from the government?
I'm not about to give the government the opportunity to define what weapon has little use. Because ultimately what that leads to, I mean, we've already got bans on fully automatic weapons and everything else, but ultimately what that leads to is, again, someone like Hillary Clinton or someone Barack Obama saying, well, you can't have assault rifles. What's an assault rifle? Something that looks scary to a liberal, right? And then next after that, it'll be semi-automatic rifles. Then it'll be semi-automatic handguns. Then it'll be regular handguns. Then it'll be shotguns. The bottom line is the left does not want us to be able to own firearms. They're not comfortable with that, and they want to use the coercive power of government to take them away, and they've already demonstrated that they will use whatever excuse necessary to include the exploitation of our students and the exploitation of victims in order to achieve it. The Second Amendment is not about sporting, it's not about hunting, it's not about target shooting. The Second Amendment is there so that you have the right to protect your property and your person and your family. And that is why it is sacred. That is why it is commonly referred to as the amendment that makes the other ones possible. And if you don't think other foreign governments without our history haven't also taken note of that, I'll remind you that Admiral Yamamoto said that if you invade the United States during World War II, you're going to find an American behind every tree with a gun. Yeah. Right? So we take pride in our independence. We take pride in our Second Amendment because it's the ability to defend ourselves. And quite frankly, there's over 100,000 cases each year where private citizens defend themselves with a firearm.
Well, here's the problem. We're all talk. You have to have action and you have to have a solution, because after after each and every one of these shootings, the left always has the proposed solution. We all know it's wrong. But there needs to be a counter-narrative. There needs to be a solution from the right. And that is why I'm supporting the President of the United States and allowing teachers in every school in this nation to do concealed carry if they're permitted to carry, if they're trained, and they're comfortable with a weapon. Here's another thing, too. We have a lot of veterans in this country. We have 800,000 veterans in Virginia, and I thank each and every one of you. You've been trained. You've been trained not to back down to a threat. You're comfortable with a weapon. And I think that it's time that we bring not just retired police officers, as I'm doing in Prince William County, but we need the authorization from the General Assembly to place veterans in our schools as well to protect our kids.
Thank you. The next one. Okay, we're going to start with Chairman Stewart on this one. Chairman Stewart, Carol of the Tea Party Federation, she says that policing for profit, it's asset forfeiture without conviction, and it allows seizing, selling, and profiting of assets from private citizens, even when there's no charges or convictions. Do you feel that this is unconstitutional, and if so, what would you do to stop it?
I don't believe that government should sacrifice your Fifth Amendment rights unless you have been duly prosecuted and convicted. I would support Rand Paul's FAIR Act. I think that we need to protect our citizens and make sure that their Fifth Amendment rights are protected.
Thank you.
I think what Corey also meant to say is he also supports Delegate Freitas' civil asset forfeiture reform bill. Because I cleared that legislation this year, and that legislation has died and died, and it's died in the House for the last several years. And this was the first time we made it all the way over to the Senate. We made it out of, in fact, we made it out of the House with all of the Republicans supporting it. First time that's happened. Then we made it all the way over to the Senate. We made it out of the first committee there. And then they sent it over to Finance, where a lot of these bills go to die. And unfortunately, they died on an 8-8 tie, but that is the farthest that legislation has gotten in a long time. And I want to thank the members of this audience, because the Tea Party came alongside, along with the Family Foundation, in order to fight for that piece of legislation, and that's why it got as far as it did. And I'll tell you what, we're winning this battle. Sometimes legislatively it takes longer in Virginia than we would like it to. But at the end of the day, the government should not be able to take your property without due process of law, and quite frankly, that is exactly what is going on right now. So I've been very, very happy to carry that as signature legislation. I'll continue to carry it. I'll continue to fight for it. I'll continue to get as many co-patrons as I need to ensure that that doesn't happen. But I'll tell you this, the biggest violations of civil asset forfeiture, it's not at the state level, it's at the federal level. That's why I've also supported additional reporting requirements, and it's why as soon as I get up to the United States Senate, I will be reining in the federal government's authority to do that and ensure that they're giving every citizen due process of law before they forfeit your property.
Delegate Freitas, first for you, from Susan Lascalette of the Richmond Tea Party. All legislators are elected to represent their constituents. If the vast majority of your constituents hold a policy decision opposed to your personal beliefs, how would you handle this?
So here's the responsibility of every representative in a free republic. The way that I represent my citizens is this. I be open and honest with you about exactly what I believe and how I plan to legislate. Because in a representative republic, what you're doing is you're delegating your inherent political authority to me. To go into an environment, to look at a case, to look at the various sides, to do the analysis, and then to cast a vote in accordance with the principles that I told you I have. Now, if someone tells you that they're going to vote however their constituents want them to, let me ask you a question. How do you determine that? Do you take a poll? What happens if the majority of your constituents don't answer that poll? You know, the obligation and the sacred trust you have with the people you represent is to be honest about what you believe and to go make hard decisions when necessary and then to come back and face the fire if need be. But I will tell you this, I believe in individual liberty. I believe in the free market. I believe in a strong national defense. I believe in respect for God as ordained by our founding fathers. I believe that you have due process of law and equality before, and that is how I will legislate. And I'm not going to let any poll from the New York Times sway me when I know what the right thing to do is, because that is what you've elected me to do, to get the information, face the fire, and take the tough votes.
Chairman Stewart.
Hey, by the way, I have to say, for a Democrat, you're not all that bad. Pretty fair question. Look, they're not all bad. They're not all bad. We can bring some of them our way. You know what I've always said to my constituents is this. If you're looking for somebody who agrees with you on everything, you have to run for office yourself. You really do. Because you're never going to agree with anybody all the time. And leadership by poll is leadership from behind. It's not leadership at all. Now, this has happened several times. I've been chairman of the second largest locality in Virginia. And I've governed it as a conservative. And there are times when I knew it was not going to be popular. I knew that it jeopardized my re-election. But I did it anyway. I led the nation's toughest crackdown on illegal immigration. I was told by Republicans, many of them, you're never going to get re-elected. But you know what? People respect you when you stand up for what you believe. But I want to tell you a story of political cowardice that just occurred here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. After years of members of the House of Delegates, 20 of them, telling everybody, all of you, that they opposed Obamacare expansion, Medicaid expansion. What do? Because they felt the threat, because they saw a poll, they betrayed each and every one of you. And they voted to expand Medicaid, which will bankrupt this state and force those who are on Medicaid to a lower quality of health care. And that is what we must stand up to as a Tea Party and as a nation.
Thank you. The next question will go to you, Chairman Stewart. Some people have argued that the use of the filibuster in the Senate allows the minority party to obstruct progress and block the legislation from being passed. Of course, the House of Representatives does not have a filibuster. Should the U.S. Senate abolish the filibuster, and why or why not?
Absolutely yes, it needs to abolish the filibuster. Do you think for one moment, is the filibuster in the United States Constitution? No, it's not. Do you think for a moment, we have an opportunity here, perhaps a very, very limited opportunity, between now and the end of 2018, to put through good conservative legislation, to cut taxes, to make those tax cuts permanent, to crack down on illegal immigration, to make sure that our immigration system is based upon merit, not just because you're related to somebody, to build the wall. But you know something, if the Democrats were in the same position that we're in today, it would take them a New York minute before they got rid of the filibuster and pushed through all kinds of left-wing legislation. If we don't take these steps today to protect our country and to protect your future and the future of your children, we may never have another chance. And absolutely, yes, I will take whatever steps are necessary, bar that what is unconstitutional, to protect your rights and to secure the prosperity and the future of this country.
Our objective is to have the candidates have as much time as possible. Delegate Freitas.
So there are different mechanisms that the Senate can use within their own rules in order to override a filibuster. But to completely abolish the filibuster? Absolutely not. Do you know how many times we've had an opportunity to be able to stop bad legislation from getting passed because of the filibuster? So again, this is really a question of how active do you want your federal government to be? I mean, yeah, it's nice right now when Donald Trump's in the White House, when we have control of the Senate and the House. What happens when we don't? I don't want an overly hyperactive federal government. I think it was funny one time when George Will once said that American political gridlock is not a problem, it's an achievement. Right? Because when the government is doing less, it usually means you get to do more. Now, yeah, it's frustrating when it doesn't work in our favor, but it's the same. There's a lot of things that don't necessarily work in our favor that we don't throw out the first time it becomes inconvenient for our side. So the filibuster can be used and abused just like anything else. It is a tool. Now, we do need to start using those Senate rules that will allow us to be able to take votes okay, without needing the 60. Okay, but to completely abolish the whole process, no, I don't think that's right. That's been an institution for some time. And again, I worry about an overly active federal government when we don't have the proper checks.
Perhaps you're not aware, the Democrats already did it. They got rid of the 60-vote rule. That's how we got Obamacare. That's how we got all this left-wing legislation in the first place. And now we're supposed to play by the Marcus of Queensberry rules? You know what? I grew up as a Democrat. I know a lot of people, everybody in my town. I know how to fight like a Democrat. Let me tell you something. I am going to run, and I'm going to govern as the most ruthless, vicious conservative you have ever seen, and that is how we're going to defeat Jim
So this next question will start with Delegate Freitas. So senators vote on federal judicial nominations. On what bases would you vote to confirm or refuse to confirm judicial nominees?
Strict constructionism. Here's what it comes down to. Scalia was absolutely right. All right, when you look at the federal judiciary and what its responsibility is to interpret the law and issue an opinion. It's not to write the law. It's not to be a super legislator. It's not to do what, I think it was Ruth Bader Ginsburg that said that, well, the evolution changes, or the Constitution changes based off of evolving standards of decency. Okay, that's called the amendment process. It's not called whatever a majority of Supreme Court justices think it should be. So my absolute 100% hardcore rule on this is, do you believe in strict originalism or constructionism, which essentially says this: when you interpret the law, you interpret it based off of what the text says at the time that it was put into effect. If you can do that, then we can make the judiciary a respectable organization again. But unfortunately right now, we do have too many people, and they're all left-wing jurists, that believe in this sort of proactive judiciary where they're going to become super legislators. And it completely undermines our Republican system of government. The other thing I would say is that we also have some problems with the court assuming far too much about its own responsibilities. The Supreme Court has the ability to issue an opinion. Okay, that doesn't mean it's the only branch of government responsible for interpreting the Constitution. We all swear an oath to the Constitution. And the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch all have to make sure that we are enforcing the Constitution and properly applying it along with originalist interpretation and the scope of Scalia and Thomas.
Roe v. Wade is unconstitutional and needs to be overturned. Yes, our Constitution. It needs to be interpreted according to the original intent of the founders. Absolutely. In fact, I'm going to make this promise right now when I'm in the United States Senate. I will not confirm any justice who believes that Roe versus Wade was correctly determined. I will absolutely knock down that. Is that a litmus test? Yes, it absolutely is.
Yes.
Because if you believe that that ruling, which has killed more than 50 million Americans, was correctly determined, then you don't deserve to be in the United States Supreme Court.
Right.
I am not afraid to tell you, I am not afraid of getting down and dirty and in the gutter and battling Democrats and left-wingers who are trying to destroy this country. We have to stop playing by these ideas of being a gentleman. We have to stop playing by these ideas that we have to do the Marcus of Queensberry rules. And we have to get mean, and we have to get aggressive, and we have to take back our country.
Thank you, Chairman Stewart. Chairman Stewart, you will get this question first. There's many ways in which you can serve the public. Why do you believe that serving as a U.S. Senator from Virginia is the best way for you to serve our Commonwealth? And do you have any particular gifts that make you uniquely capable to serve well?
Well, for one thing, I know how to get elected.
Yeah.
I know how to get elected in a very tough district. But let me say this. Mitch McConnell is a bad guy.
That's right. Yeah.
Bad guy. There's a unique party in this country It's not just the establishment Democrats. It's not just the establishment Republicans. It's all one party. If you don't believe it, take a look at it. What's the difference between George W. Bush and Hillary Clinton?
Not much.
Not too much. You know what? You have to have a record of being willing to stand up, not just to the Democrats, not just to the media. You have to have a proven record of being able to stand up sometimes to your own party leadership, and that is exactly what I It's not enough. It's not enough just to vote right, folks. Sometimes you got to fight and you got to be brutal. What happened to the House of Delegates a little over 2 weeks ago, where they voted to expand Obamacare in this state. I mean, it was done under Republican Speaker of the House, Kurt Cox.
Yes, it was.
And nobody in that House called for his resignation. He needs to go, and we need to stand up to him.
Again, there are many ways in which you can serve the public. Why do you believe that serving as a U.S. Senator from Virginia is the best way for you to serve our Commonwealth? And do you have any particular gifts that make you uniquely capable to serve well?
So, my first service to the public was in the military. So I served 11 years on active duty, the 82nd Airborne Division, the 25th Infantry Division, and then I volunteered for Special Forces after 9/11 and served 2 combat tours overseas. So I know what an unconventional fight looks like. I'll tell you this much, that's what I thought I was going to do. That's how I thought I was going to serve my community and serve my country. But when Barack Obama got elected, when I was sitting over Iraq in 2008, I really felt as if, and he ran on this platform of fundamentally trying to change the country. And that's where I realized, I think, that the true fight for the hearts and minds was not taking place in Iraq. It was taking place here at home, and it was taking place within the political spectrum. And so I'll tell you right now, there's a lot of ways that we can run this, we can run for this race, and there's a lot of things that we can do, but I will tell you this. We have to get back to, once again, inspiring people about what it means to be a Virginian and what it means to be an American. We have a unique opportunity in this country to live our lives the way we wish to. And what I have found is that I served in the General Assembly. I would submit bill after bill trying to increase liberty, trying to increase economic opportunity, and I would hear back, you can't pass that. Why not? Because there's a federal regulation. Oh, really? Show me under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution where the federal government has the authority to do that. And they couldn't answer my question, but it kept perverting the system. So if that's where the fight used to be in Iraq, I went to Iraq. The fight's in D.C. now, that's where I'm going now.
So we just have a couple questions left. This one to Delegate Freitas. Your eventual opponent will be an incumbent U.S. Senator from the opposite side of the political spectrum, who is also Hillary Clinton's running mate. The most recent statewide elections led to a sweep of Democratic candidates. How will your campaign stop the wave and lead to a win?
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody, Tim Kaine, the guy that wanted to work for Hillary Clinton, the one that said that all of you and all of us are horrible, evil, bigoted, narrow-minded, racist people because we didn't vote for her. Right? That's the mentality they keep throwing off and say, you know what, I'm going to make Tim Kaine own that. I'm going to make Tim Kaine own that. Not only that, but Tim Kaine worked in collusion with Hillary Clinton to disenfranchise millions of Democrat voters. There's a fight going on within the Democratic Party right now that, quite frankly, we need to bring up. We need to make them aware of it. Because I'll tell you what, there was a number of issues where younger voters, they're tired of the government status quo. And Tim Kaine is a poster child for the government status quo.
That's right.
So the way that we win as conservatives statewide, it is not by surrendering on our principles. That is never the answer to victory. Because this isn't just about winning a political contest. It's about winning the culture. It's not just about winning this election. It's about winning the next 10 after that. And the way that you do that is you once again put the emphasis back on the power of the individual to live and thrive within a free country, to be able to live their life in accordance with their definition of happiness, not the government's definition of happiness. To be able to be secure in their person and property, to know that when they stand before a judge, they're going to get equal protection before the law, regardless of who their parents are, regardless of what kind of political connections they have. That is a powerful message, and somewhere there along the lines, Republicans forgot to tie our policy positions back down to that core philosophy. We're the party that loves the individual, that fights for the individual, and that is a winning message.
We're not going to win this election with cheap speeches, folks.
That's right.
We're not going to do it that way. I've been through a lot of tough elections. My compadre here has been through 2 elections. The first time, he didn't even have an opponent. The second time, what's the size of your district? 80,000 people in a solid red district. My district is 6 times larger than a House of Delegates seat, and it's in Northern Virginia. I know a few things about winning in Northern Virginia. You know what? You have to start nominating candidates who have a proven record of being able to win in tough districts. I know how to do it. Let me tell you something about the Gillespie campaign. Big mistake. You know what they did? They didn't engage in controversial conservative issues. And as a result of that, you know what happened? Their base came out anyway. Our base stayed home.
Yep.
If you want to win, you cannot be afraid of supporting and defending our history and our heritage. You cannot be afraid to support the President of the United States even when he's being attacked. You cannot be afraid of cracking down on illegal immigration. You've got to get out your base, and you've got to have a proven record to show that you can actually win in Northern Virginia and other difficult parts of this state.
We have one final question before the candidates get to make their closing arguments. This final question will start with you, Chairman Stewart. Do you pledge today to support the eventual nominee of the Republican Party for U.S. Senate? And have you heard anything in this debate that might stop you from supporting the other candidate on stage?
Absolutely not. I think he's a great guy. I really do. I honestly think that Tim Kaine, if he was nominated, I think Tim Kaine would chew him up and spit him out. He does not have the electoral experience. He does not know how to win in Northern Virginia. I think he would be destroyed. But I want to use this opportunity to ask my question with the red card.
Yes, sir. You can use it.
So in 2013, Governor McDonnell, the quintessential establishment Republican, who endorsed him, by the way, you can have him, he passed the Virginia's biggest tax increase in Virginia history. And just this year, and they said, it's okay, we're going to spend all that money on the roads. But the House of Delegates and the state Senate just passed House Bill 1538. And you know what that does? It takes $500 million worth of that revenue and shifts it over to the DC Metro system. So my question for Nick is, how did you vote on House Bill 1538?
And Delegate Freitas will have 90 seconds to respond.
Sure. So, yeah, Governor McDonnell has endorsed me, along with Ron Paul, Mike Lee, Brenda Cody, by the way, Mike Rubino and Mark Lloyd, who were the 2 people that ran Trump's campaign in Virginia. So on that bill, oh good, I'll take all the endorsements, Corey. I'm just not leaving much left for you. Actually, Laura Ingraham has not endorsed.
Oh, yes, she has.
Let's see her say it publicly. So here I'll say this much. The bill so Tim Hugo had the bill with respect to taking money and was putting money into Metro. It wasn't a good bill, but it did one thing that I liked, and that was it put Maryland and it put Washington D.C. on notice that they're actually going to have to pick up their share of the burden when it comes to the transportation costs, and it also went for other reforms. And it's the same sort of thing that I'll do when I'm up in D.C., where we say that essentially no more money is going to the Metro system until we see the sort of significant reforms that we need in order to make sure that it's not abused. Because right now, you've got this small cabal that is dominating when it comes to Metro spending. And the problem is that there is a variety of ways that we need to deal with transportation issues, but what we should be doing is pushing more of those decisions back down to the locality Because those decisions should not always be made in Richmond. They should not always be made in D.C. They should be made down at the local level.
How did you vote?
Thank you.
I already said I voted for it, but I voted for Hugo's vote.
We're going to need everybody to please remain quiet while we have Delegate Freitas answer the final question. We will still have time. Yes. Do you pledge today to support the eventual nominee of the Republican Party for U.S. Senate? And have you heard anything in this debate that might stop you from supporting the other candidate on stage?
No, I'll support our candidate. I'll support our candidate, but I will say this. I am very concerned about anybody that would once again say that we're just going to give the federal government all kinds of authority because we hope they'll use it the way that Corey Stewart would hope that they would. I'm sorry, but over the course of our history, we have found that that is not always the case. And we need to make sure that we keep the federal government within its proper constitutional boundaries. Even when we wish the federal government would move faster or move harder on something that we want, the founders put the Constitution in place with those limitations for a reason. And the moment you start to chip away at that, guess what happens? The other side gets in power and they run with it. So you need to make sure that whoever we send to this office has a deep-rooted conviction and upholding the Constitution within its original intent. That's what we need to be doing, and that's what your representative from the Commonwealth of Virginia, a Commonwealth and a state that has more responsibility for our Constitution than any other place in this country. And that's what we need to focus on. Now, Corey has politely mentioned to everybody that, yes, I've won all my elections. And yes, I'm in a Republican area. And Corey's won elections in Prince William, and I think he should be congratulated on that. But Corey has also lost 2 statewide elections. And part of the reason why I think Corey has lost those is because he's done so much to divide the Republican Party. The Republican Party does a good job dividing itself. We don't need additional help. So my commitment is this. If Corey gets the nomination, I'll be beating the shoe leather for them. But by gosh, can we stop engaging in a circular firing squad in Virginia with the Republican Party?
Statements, 90-second closing statements. Chairman Stewart closes first.
The federal government has an obligation to protect the territorial integrity of the United States and to limit those who enter our country. Amen. And if a state or local official disobeys the federal government's legal right, constitutional right to do that, then they need to be prosecuted.
Yeah. That's right.
It's not enough to rely on your ideology and say, oh, we should never tell the states what to do. There are people who are being hurt in this country. Go across this country. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of working class people who Donald Trump finally, by the way, we have a great president of the United States in Donald Trump doing that. Folks, if you're looking for somebody who is unabashedly willing to stand up for you, I was the only official, the only elected official on a statewide level who stood up for our history and our monuments. I was the only one. I was the one who advocated the toughest crackdown on illegal immigration. I was the one who stood up to the General Assembly when the House of Delegates passed Medicaid expansion. I was the one who stood up for President Trump when it was difficult to do so in 2015 to lead his campaign. And I was the one who stood up to Dominion and Google and Facebook as they wanted a better deal than county residents. If you want a winner and you want a fighter, then I'm your candidate, and I ask for your vote on June 12th. Thank you very
much.
So, again, I want to thank Corey for being here. I want to thank you all for being here as well. I really appreciate you taking the time. This is what civic engagement in this country is supposed to look like. So you know my background, right? To say that anybody would chew me up and spit me out, that is adorable. I'm the Green Beret with 2 combat tours, and I always tell people the Green Berets fight unconventional warfare and counterinsurgency, which really prepares you for domestic politics. When I came into the General Assembly, I came in opposing the Speaker. When I came into the General Assembly, I came in challenging a 14-year incumbent Because when it's time to challenge our own party, I'm willing to step up and do that. When it's time to work with our party, I'm also willing to step up and do that. And one of the things that I have been very successful on, you go look at every single conservative group out there that gives ratings, VCDL, NRA, Family Foundation, Americans for Prosperity, American Conservative Union. I've got A ratings from all of them. Not just for voting the right way, but for carrying the legislation and taking the hard fights. Let me show you my inbox when I carried the Religious Liberty Bill in the General Assembly. But I don't mind doing that because I'm a fighter. I wasn't built for peacetime, which is good because we're not in peacetime. But I will tell you this, the way that we are going to win and the way that we are going to protect the legacy for our children is by once again inspiring people, not making them afraid. We need to once again remind Virginians and Americans who they are and to fully embrace that, and I can do that.
Thank you all so much for your attention, and thank you to both of the folks, both Delegate Freitas and Chairman Stewart, and thank you all for your attention. You've been fantastic.
Before you leave, is this working? Before you leave, I've got a couple announcements, and then we need to talk about the straw poll. I'm not sure this is working very well. I got it right in my mouth. These are the straw poll rules. The voting will be between 1 and 2 o'clock, and we will cut the vote off at 2 o'clock so we can make it count. There's a black table in the center of the atrium out here. Anybody who received a ballot is welcome to vote. There'll be one ballot box. All ballots should be placed in one box. Each voter shall cast a vote for only one candidate. No option for undecided. Ballots marked with more than one selection will not be counted. And a voter may change their vote on the ballot, but it must be abundantly clear which candidate was chosen for the vote to count. And again, that's from 1 to 2 o'clock. I want to announce something fantastic. There was an election for chairmanship in Fairfax County today. Our own Tim Hannigan won. 59% of the vote. Out in the lobby, one of our speakers later, Sina McCullough, is selling her book during lunch. The book is called Hands Off My Food. It's a fantastic book. I suggest you check it out, and if so desired, purchase, please. Last but not least, lunch will be served out here. It's a box lunch. If you have a green armband or a blue armband, you can partake of lunch. Other than that, no lunch for you. Okay, with that, I'd like to bless the food, and then we can go ahead and eat. If I can, everybody bow their heads. Dear Lord, we've gathered here today to share our thoughts and our ideas, enjoy conversation, meet old friends, and make new friends. And now enjoy lunch. All of these things we thank you for. Amen.
Hey, are you someplace?